So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things music and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Bob Marley, One Love. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, you are in luck, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course. And please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? Bob Marley, One Love. So, as you may have guessed already, this is the new Bob Marley musical biopic, and it stars Kingsley Ben-Adir in the lead role of Bob Marley, alongside Lashana Lynch as Bob Marley's wife, Rita Marley. And before watching this film, I knew barely anything about Bob Marley. I'm not really a fan of his music. His music isn't really my jam. I'll see myself out right now, pun intended. Anyway, yeah, his music just really isn't for me. But I wanted to hear about his story. You know, that's one of the things which I always find to be a draw about a musical biopic, is to learn about this artist's story, this iconic artist's story. That's one of the reasons I was excited to see Elvis when it came out in 2022, and that's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to seeing the Amy Winehouse biopic later this year, because I want to learn more about this iconic artist's story. And that's why I went to go and see this Bob Marley biopic, this Bob Marley musical biopic at that, because I don't know much about Bob Marley's story, and this film did inform me, you know, about a few things about his life, but not many things. But still, you know, I didn't know much about his story before watching this film, and I liked the trailers. I thought the trailer to this film made it look great, and I've never really given his music a proper go. I've listened to his music here and there, sometimes when it's on the radio, sometimes when I'm in a shop and it starts playing or whatnot. You know, I've heard his music here and there, but I've never really given Bob Marley's music a proper go, and I was hoping to go into the film and hear some new Bob Marley music that I hadn't heard before, and that I actually would quite like. So those are the reasons I was excited to see this film. I wanted to hear more Bob Marley music, I wanted to know more about his story, I thought the trailers looked great, and, you know, it's a film to watch at the cinema. So that's exactly what I did yesterday. I went to go and watch this film at the cinema, and honestly, I thought it was fine. It's not awful, and it's perfectly watchable. It's mildly entertaining. It's led by two great performances from Kingsley Ben-Adir, who, you know, his performance as Bob Marley felt believable. So did Lashana Lynch's performance as Rita Marley. Those two performances, I think, were the best parts of the film. There were some other good supporting performances as well, and there were some enjoyable parts. There were some parts where I found what was going on somewhat entertaining, like the recording sessions are quite fun to watch, and you can tell that the filmmakers behind this film are trying to do something different. They're trying to make this musical biopic stand out against the others. However, in my opinion, they don't succeed. The storytelling in this film was all over the place for me, and it didn't really tell me much about Bob Marley's story, about why he is considered this genius and this influential artist. It told me in parts, but I wanted it to show me why he was so influential, and I never really got that from this film. And from someone like me who doesn't know Bob Marley's story, I was watching a lot of this film very confused, because it's jumping around a lot. The film doesn't have this linear storytelling. It isn't told in a chronological fashion, say like Bohemian Rhapsody tells the story of Freddie Mercury and Queen in a in a chronological fashion. It's not quite a chronological fashion, it's a full-on chronological fashion. This film doesn't do that. It jumped around a lot to the point that I wasn't sure how it all fit together. It felt like the pieces of a great musical biopic were there, but it wanted the audience, it wanted the viewer, the spectator, if you will, to put the pieces together after watching the film. But I didn't care that much about the film because I didn't find it that engaging and that informative, that when I was coming out the cinema, I didn't care to put the pieces of how the biopic actually fit together in my head. I was more let down by it because it's not that engaging, and the storytelling is not done in a way that feels open to anybody who doesn't know Bob Marley's story. And I was watching this and I was more, like I said, I was more confused than entertained. Plus, the film didn't affect me as much as I hoped it would. The most affecting and saddening part of the film is when it comes up at the end that Bob Marley died at the age of 36, if I get my facts correct. If I remember correctly, it comes at the age and says Bob Marley, comes at the end and it says Bob Marley died at the age of 36. And I was quite shocked by that, but I found that more shocking, that little piece of information, I found more shocking than anything else in the film, and it didn't feel real enough to me. It never felt like I was watching Bob Marley's story. A lot of this film felt inauthentic. It didn't feel like it was actually telling the story. It didn't feel authentic enough. The performances, the lead two performances, felt believable. They felt authentic, but everything else around those lead two performances didn't feel real to me. It felt at times like it was a play. It felt at times like it was just actors doing a performance, and I never felt like I was watching Bob Marley's story. I still don't know a lot about his story. I really don't know a lot about his life, and I've seen this film, and it's just under 2 hours, and I can't tell you much about his life. But I've seen this film and I really found it unengaging. I didn't find the storytelling that open, that, inviting, so I can actually get into this film even though I'm not a Bob Marley fan. And I struggled in parts of this film because it's really a mess. And it's beginning to, it really encapsulated something I have with musical biopics right now. After seeing Baz Luhrmann's Elvis in 2022, I'm beginning to feel a bit musical biopic fatigued, because that film had it for me. That is still my favourite musical biopic, because yes, it did the whole musical biopic formula in a way we've seen countless times before. Yes, it did, but at the same time though, it was doing it in a fresh, exciting and engaging way. It was Baz Luhrmann telling Elvis' story in what felt like the best way possible. And since then, I've seen other musical biopics, and they haven't had the same effect on me, because I'm watching them thinking, well, it's not Elvis though. It's not Elvis. And that is what I felt with Bob Marley One Love. That's what I felt with this film. And I'm watching, I'm thinking, I get what they're going for. They're trying to differentiate it. They're trying to make it stand out amongst the pack. But for me, it reminded me how much better Elvis is as a musical biopic, and how this film isn't really doing anything that I haven't seen other musical biopics, or biopics at that, not just musical biopics. Biopics, it's not doing anything that I haven't seen other biopics do better, or do in a similar sort of way. I was watching this and I was thinking in certain parts, yeah, I've seen that done in another film. I've seen that done in that film. I've seen it done here, and nothing about it really made me go, wow, I haven't seen that done like that before. I am beginning to feel tired, and I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it, bored of musical biopics. Any musical biopics coming out in the future need to tell their stories in more exciting and engaging and fresh and new ways that we haven't seen done before. They need to be more exciting and more inviting in their storytelling. I really think that's the case, and they need to do something different. Don't just tell the artist's story. Tell it in a way that's different than Walk the Line, or different than Bohemian Rhapsody, or different than Love and Mercy. Do it differently, and that way I might get more engaged and actually quite enjoy the film, because this film isn't bad. It's perfectly fine. But I don't really remember much about it. I really don't remember much about it, because it made me feel bored of musical biopics. And musical biopics aren't the only genre where it's the same sort of idea every single time. Superhero movies have the same sort of idea every time. So do spy movies. But the thing is, I'm critical of those films unless they do something different. My favourite comic book movies, my favourite superhero movies are superhero movies that twist the idea of the genre, twist the idea of a superhero story. Same with the spy genre. My favourite spy movies are ones which do the typical spy idea, but change it up a little. Like, one of my favourite spy movies is the Bond film On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because Bond gets married in that film, but it still ends tragically. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm on about. And musical biopics in the future need to do something like that. I don't mind if they have the same story. Elvis basically has the same story as Bohemian Rhapsody. The story of this influential and this iconic artist, and their rise to fame and their struggles with fame, and then how they're remembered now. It's basically the same story as Bohemian Rhapsody, but it tells a story in an exciting and fresh way that I hadn't seen done before. And I wanted this film to do that. I really wanted this film to tell its story in a way that I hadn't seen done before, and tell in a way that I could get fully engaged in it and latch onto the story and really get emotionally engaged in it more than anything. Because I didn't feel that the film portrayed Bob Marley in a particularly complex light. And I've heard that other documentaries, because I did a bit of looking up after watching the film, I've heard that other documentaries, well, this isn't a documentary, so I've heard that other films, should I say, have done that though. And that Bob Marley is actually quite a complex person, but I didn't get that from this film. I mean, you see two sides of him. You see the side of him that, you see the side of Bob Marley, the showman side, and the side where the musical side of him. You see that in this film. And you also see the side of him where he's dealing with his demons. But all the stuff when he's dealing with his demons and having some turmoil on the side is pushed under the rug later on in the film in some pretty unmemorable sequences. Into pretty unmemorable scenes, should I say. They're not sequences. In some pretty unmemorable scenes later on in the film, all the stuff with the turmoil that was going on in his life is pushed under the rug, and it's mainly showing you how the film is mainly a celebration of Bob Marley's life, and I would have liked there to be more of a complexity about Bob Marley, complexity shown surrounding Bob Marley in this film. I never really felt like the film got under the skin of its lead, unlike Elvis did. And I know I keep comparing to Elvis, but that's because that film got it right. That's how you do a musical biopic. Yes, it's the same sort of idea we've done so many times, but it's doing it in a way that we haven't seen done like this, though. It's Baz Luhrmann telling Elvis' story in the best way possible, and I didn't feel that the director of this film, I'm not going to credit them because I don't think they did a great job, but I don't think that the director of this film told Bob Marley's story in the best way. When I went in to go and watch Elvis, I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know anything about the king of rock and roll, as he's often referred to as. But as soon as I came out of Elvis, I wanted to know so much more about him. I wanted to listen to his music. I remember coming back home from watching Elvis and listening to his music in the car on the entirety of my journey home. But I didn't after I watched his film. After I watched his film, I listened to a little bit of Bob Marley music, then that was it. And I didn't feel like I wanted to know more about his story, like a musical biopic should make you do, And I think that was a missed opportunity. I think that's another reason this film didn't really work for me. It was an unengaging experience for me. It was very messy at times, and I didn't really take anything away from the film. I still don't really know about Bob Marley's story. That all being said, there was some new music in the film that was introduced to me. You know, some music that I hadn't heard from Bob Marley before, which I did like. There were some very good performances in there. Kingsley Benadir's Bob Marley is very good. So is Sultana Lynch, as Rita Marley, and it's not an awful watch, but I found it to be disappointing. This film didn't really tell me why Bob Marley was considered to be a genius and why he was so influential. And I felt like it missed the mark there, because it tried to tell me, but I would have preferred it to show me. And I never really... I didn't come away from this film going, wow, what an artist Bob Marley was. And I wish that I did. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Bob Marley One Love... I'm going to say it's a 5 out of 10. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10 because I think this film was fine. Again, I don't think it's a horrible film or anything. And I can see people watching this and getting a really good time out of it. And if you're a Bob Marley fan, or if you like his music and, you know, you watch this film and you enjoyed it, I can completely see why. And if you did enjoy the film, that's great. I don't want to take that away from you whatsoever. Because there have been some people... When I was walking out the cinema, actually. When I was walking out the cinema yesterday after watching the film, someone behind me said, well, I really loved that. And I was thinking, that's great. You know? Because I always like it when someone likes a film more than I do. Personally, I did find it to be a bit of a hard watch. And, yeah. Musical biopics in the future need to do something different. Because this film made me feel like I'm beginning to feel fatigued by musical biopics. I'm not getting that excited for them anymore. Because they all kind of feel the same. And this film sort of encapsulated that feel for me. Honestly, off the top of my head, the only musical biopics I'm excited to see in the next couple of years are, you've guessed it already because I did a video on them in the past couple of days, the Beatles biopics. The 4 Beatles biopics which have been announced, which are coming out in 2027, because they're doing that differently. They're doing it as 4 films which are all going to be interconnected. If you don't know what I'm on about, watch a video I made, watch a podcast I did, should I say, in the past couple of days. I'm excited to see those 4 films because I think they're going to do the story, the whole idea of a musical biopic differently, in a way we haven't seen before. And that's what future musical biopics need to do, because Bob Marley One Love, I felt like I'd seen the story before and done better. I felt like it was a checklist of what to include in a musical biopic, and it, you know, I'll give credit to the filmmakers. It felt like they're trying to do something different, but in my opinion, they did not succeed. You know, again, not terrible, but it's fine. It's nothing special, and it could have been. It could have even. It could have. It should have told me what Bob. It should have told me why Bob Marley was this genius, why he was so influential, and it should have told me Bob Marley's story, and I never felt like it did. From someone who didn't know anything about Bob Marley before seeing the film, I still don't know anything about him now. And that's not a great sign after watching a musical biopic on said artist. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more, Bob Marley One Love is a fine film, and that's why I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Bob Marley One Love and you loved it, that's great. And if you felt something to me, that's also great. Whatever your thoughts are on this film, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this concert. God, what am I saying? On this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts very, very soon on this channel. As what he said, thank you so much for watching or listening to the podcast, and I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.